Whether you want to do full-time van life or RV living full-time makes sense for you, or heck, maybe you're a digital nomad, this video is going to help you out. I'm going to tell you the 7 top things that you need to consider when you go to set up your domicile state, and then also the one biggest mistake that you could make that could cost you thousands of dollars.
Oh, the day I break these chains, I'm bound for the life of the simple things.
So first off, I think it's pretty obvious that when you go off and you're starting to do the full-timing lifestyle, whether you're doing that digital nomad sort of thing, you're an RVer, or you happen to be a van lifer, what we got going on is a lot of times we find ourselves with a little bit less income than we did before, where we need to be a little bit more careful on where our money goes. And so taxes can be such a huge part of the funnel away from us on that money that I think the number one consideration for us that are jumping out in this lifestyle, or if you're brand new or whatever, is going to be taxes, right? I really think the most important one is income tax, and that being both, you know, personal income tax and then also like business income tax. I don't really think sales tax is really that important of an issue. I also don't really think the personal property tax is that big of an issue. And the reason why I feel that for full-time RVers or van lifers or even digital nomads is really we don't carry a lot of property if you think about it. I mean, it can be a substantial cost in a rare handful of cases, but there's so much less personal property that you're going to even be able to carry around that they don't seem to be that big of an impact. You know, so on the personal property one, as far as sales tax, if you're doing this lifestyle to travel, really, I mean, you're going to end up with the same amount that you're paying in sales tax no matter what, because it's just going to depend on where you're at. So it boils down to the income tax. So there's only 9 states that don't have a state income tax. You know, you're going to have Alaska, Florida, Nevada, South Dakota, Texas, Washington, Wyoming, Tennessee, and New Hampshire. All the other states have an income tax. And so you've whittled it down to just 9 states. Now that we covered the most important item, I would go ahead and we need to start noting some of the others. So first of all, insurance, and whether you can utilize whatever the state-based insurance is out of state in case you're work camping or you're living off other income sources, and so your employer doesn't already just have a healthcare plan set up for you. Also, vehicle registrations. What's the annual cost of vehicle registrations? Insurance, car insurance, vehicle insurance, I should say. So how much it costs to insure your RV, how much it costs to insure your car or your van or what have you. So these are really important considerations in ways that you control your costs when you go out to do this lifestyle. Also, does that state that you're registering in require a smog or also a inspection of the vehicle? Because those can cause you issues like when you're out on the road that you have to get back in your state just so that you can actually do an inspection on the vehicle. So it could add a lot of extra miles or planning that you would have to do that could really be a rotten deal. Another really important consideration when you're choosing your domicile state is how often you're going to have to be back in that state technically to maintain your domicile or your status with the state. And that varies anywhere from 6 months, like in a state like Washington, to as little as 1 day every 5 years when you're considering like South Dakota. So really, they only require that you spend 1 day every 5 years in South Dakota to maintain your state residency there, where Washington, technically it's 183 days, I think it was. So I mean, there's a pretty big difference there. I would say that Washington definitely wouldn't be for me because of the amount that I like to travel and where it's positioned. Even though I got friends and family there, you would say it would be perfect, but if you had to go somewhere. Now to go ahead and get into talking about what the number one mistake is that full-timers, all kinds of nomads end up making when they're establishing a domicile, and what they do after that to maintain that domicile state. So first of all, a lot of people you'll hear refer to it as state residency. That's not really a legal term that's even that important in this process. Also, there's another thing that you'll hear, and that's called statutory residency, which is a big deal, and then domicile state. And so to kind of explain what the difference is between them is, you know, domicile state is like legally defined as being the state that you intend to make your home state, where you always intend to go back to, and that kind of thing. And so whenever we're doing this process and we're selecting a domicile state, that's what we're doing. We're trying to establish legal grounds that this place is where we're always going to go to, and that's the state that we belong to, right? Now, state residency changes all the time for full-timer type people. So your state residency is going to be wherever you happen to physically be at this moment in your RV or van or the hotel that you're staying in if you're a digital nomad. And that's why I'm saying it's really not that important. You know, it's going to be constantly changing. But what is very important is the statutory residency. And this is where a lot of mistakes are made and a lot of problems happen. And there's been a lot of lawsuits and people have lost thousands on it and had tax penalties and everything else. So statutory residency, what that boils down to is a state will have laws on their book that allow them to claim you as a resident, right? Which allows them to tax you. So they can hit you with their income tax and whatnot. And some of them are more involved than others. But a very important rule to basically just always follow is try not to ever spend more than 183 days in any state. You know, and so some of you guys that are taking work camper gigs that are a year long that aren't in your domicile state are putting yourselves at risk, especially if you recently were trying to sever ties with an old state that you had as your domicile state before you started doing this lifestyle. I mean, there was a poor couple in Minnesota that actually they went ahead and they went to cut ties with Minnesota, established themselves in South Dakota, I believe it was. And then years down the road, they ended up sued for back taxes and penalties by the state of Minnesota, who then still were claiming them. So the biggest and toughest part of it is really just, you know, severing the ties. And so that's really important. We're going to get into that in another video. Now, statutory residency can also be even less than that 184 days. So if you're going to spend any real time over, say, 30 days anywhere, you really need to look into the statutory situation in that state, or you could end up with a big tax burden. Now, there was some recent legislation that made it so it was said that you couldn't be like double taxed on income, you know, and that's true and all. That was established, but say a state like California that has a pretty high income tax, for an example, right? They can still charge you the difference of whatever state you did your work in, or whatever state you're established in if you have income tax. But let's say you worked in Iowa that has an income tax, and Iowa's income tax is less than California. California, if they can nail you with this concept of statutory residency, can then come after you for the difference between what you paid Iowa and what they charge for taxes. So it's really important to look into that. A lot of people have been really taken to the cleaners, not knowing that. And especially you guys out there that are work camping, you know, where there's states that'll want to double dip. And in our next video, we'll go ahead and we'll be breaking down in more detail, like evaluating those 9 states I talked about that have no income tax. We're going to discuss how much each thing costs. I'm going to try to get a breakdown for you as best as possible. Sometimes that's a little difficult, and that's the one I'm going to be doing every year going forward. We're going to talk more about, in a third video, more about this statutory residency and severing your current domicile state relationship appropriate legally, so that you guys don't get yourselves in trouble down the road with tax issues and stuff like that. And so go ahead, if you're not subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe to the channel here and click the bell so that you get the notification when those videos go up. I intend to have out the next video where we're going to start breaking down all the costs for those 9 states that I talked about and whittle it down to what the best states are to select from, and then you guys go ahead and do that. Nobody can really tell you a single state that's best, but there's definitely ways to whittle it down to 3 or 4 states to choose from you. Get out there, connect with people, live your big story, and make sure you do something every single day to reduce world suck. Peace, guys.